and a very warm welcome to the United Debate Show. Well, what a few days it's been. First of all, on Friday, we had Rafael Benitez's rant about Alex Ferguson, but yesterday on the pitch, the perfect response as Chelsea were demolished 3-0 at Old Trafford. My name's Alistair Mann, and with me to discuss all the issues of former United and Ireland striker Frank Stapleton, and alongside him is BBC Radio Manchester's Steve Wyeth. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. We'll talk about all those issues, but obviously the starting point has to be yesterday's game at Old Trafford. And Steve, you've seen virtually all United's games this season. Have they been less trouble than they were yesterday?
Amazing, wasn't it? You thought it was... I was confident United would win the game. I wasn't expecting Chelsea to allow them to win it so easily. That to be such a controlled United performance, you'd have expected more commitment, more dedication from Chelsea, and to, at least at some point during the game, try and put United under a bit of pressure.
Did that tell people watching more about Chelsea than it did Manchester United, perhaps, yesterday? Yeah,
I think so. It was the match itself. I thought the first half was pretty insipid, and maybe the turning point was the goal just before half time. You couldn't have got it at a better time, but I just thought the game was. It was constant. They were cancelling each other out. There was no creativity in the match. I think the goalkeepers had very few shots to really save, and I thought this game's going to end up as a draw. And neither team looked like they were going to get it by the scruff of the neck. But getting the goal gave United that incentive, and it also it made Chelsea change their formation for the second half. So all of a sudden, the whole thing opened out. The second half was much better. But what alarmed me more than anything was the lack of hunger in the Chelsea team. Really, for them to be contenders, they've gone backwards in 2 years.
Would you describe, Frank's used the word hunger. Did you sense that? There wasn't quite the hunger there of Chelsea of the last 2 or 3 years?
When was the last time you saw one of the big four teams crumble after conceding one goal, to be so demoralised? They couldn't wait to get off the pitch. At the end, they completely lost their shape and organisation in the second half. Drogba had an awful game, but even at the back, you just felt United could attack them at will. They were creating space for themselves, and the thought with Terry and Carvalho back together at the heart of the Chelsea defence, they'd have been more solid than that, but they were getting pulled apart far too easily. It's great for United, but as Frank says, you don't see where Chelsea go from here in terms of challenging for the title.
Let's go back to before kick-off time. You're looking at the two team sheets. What were your feelings about the sides named and the 22 who are going to be out there?
Well, first of all, you look at the United team, naturally, and I looked at it and I thought, this is a strange one. I always felt that Park was going to play. Obviously, Ronaldo was going to play. And in Fergie's mind is looking at the two full-backs for Chelsea. How do you stop them? Not so much how do you stop them, but how do you stop them being as effective as they have been? Because we must look at what's previous to this. Chelsea's away form has been the best all season. So that's the first thing you've got to do. Not so much think about how they stop them because they're playing at home. But he puts two players. We know what Park can do. We know what Ronaldo can do. And they just switched on all the game and they stopped. So they made the game very narrow. So then you look at it. What alarmed me and worried me a little bit was the creativity that would be in the team from United's point of view. Did have Ryan Giggs. And I know that Fergie came out afterwards and said that he had kept him for this match in particular. Eyebrows went up when Carrick wasn't playing and he played Fletcher. But he sees the players every day. They use them. They can see how they are in training. And he obviously has planned out up to this point. They've got through a really tough run of games, being away out of the country in Japan, and then coming back. And it's not firing on all cylinders. I don't even think yesterday. We can all look at the result and we can look at the fact that it was a tough game, but they're still not there in terms of what we saw last season. But they're still winning matches, and that's more important at the moment.
Is that the feeling in the press area amongst the press that United are still not quite the United of exhibiting all those things they exhibited last season?
They don't need to be at the moment, though, do they? Like as Frank was just saying, they've beaten Chelsea 3-0 without really having to be at their best. And it's sort of the way the Premier League shaped up a bit this season. Liverpool are top of the table, but have sort of flattered to deceive at times. Even when they beat Manchester United earlier on in the season, they didn't play well in that game. It was two defensive mistakes which allowed them to win the match 2-1. So United have managed to hang in there and be challengers despite not being at their best and being able to miss games by going to Monaco for the Super Cup and to Japan for the Club World Cup. They must be loving the scenario at the moment, knowing that they've been able to take those breaks and not be at the races and still be odds-on favourites now to retain the title.
You mentioned, he was almost practically saving Ryan Giggs for the game yesterday. He's brought Gary Neville back after it seemed as though he wasn't necessarily the first choice right back. Those decisions kind of shape managers. It seemed to work for him yesterday.
you could hardly say that shaping as Alex Ferguson, can you now? He's getting close to the end of his career rather than the beginning.
Know what I mean?
I know.
It's a big game.
Decisions that needed to be made.
Yeah.
But more than anything with Fergie, he knows his players. And players that he's always relied on haven't let him down. The likes of Ryan Giggs, Gary Neville, Paul Scholes, they haven't let him down. He knows that he can depend on them. He will sit them down one-on-one and ask them, all right, with Ryan Giggs, he knows what he'll get. And that central midfield thing, he's not played for a while. He's played him a little left of central midfield. But yesterday, he was the playmaker, he was the prompter, and he was the one who kept his head. Well, everybody was going mad in that particular, in the early part of that first half, where nobody could get the ball down. All he did was just keep the game simple. The manager didn't make the decision. I mean, Gary Neville, people had written him off. But you see, that's the thing about how does the manager get so much from a player to come back? Because he always keeps telling them that he believes in him, that he's still got a future at the club, that not to actually believe anything he reads in the paper. What I say is what I say in here is between you and me, and I believe in you, just keep on going. Of course, Gary's getting better and better and fitter. We mustn't forget 18 months out of the game. Yeah. He just don't come back. It's taken him 6 months to find his feet again. I mean, yesterday he was consistent and steady, and he didn't take any chances. But all that experience in a game like yesterday, he could have put Rafael and thought, well, you know, I didn't mention it before. We were talking about what's missing from United is swashbuckling from last season. Right. But what is more efficient now, and he knows what he needs for certain games, and he'll switch it around again, I'm sure, for Wednesday.
But was that, 8 clean sheets in a row now in the Premier League? I mean, and that's with Rio Ferdinand, I believe, going for a scan today to determine the nature of his back problem, with Patrice Evra hobbling off with, obviously we don't know the extent of that just yet. But this is a United side who've had Johnny Evans in there, who haven't had the same back five in, but clearly it's that feeling, isn't it, that there are replacements that are good enough to replace those who are, you would imagine to be the first 11.
Well, the minute you lose Rio Ferdinand, you think you're going to lose a bit of the consistency and that solid defensive platform that they appear to have created, especially Ferdinand and Vidic playing together. But 8 of those consecutive clean sheets, 5 of them have been with Evans and Vidic at the heart of the defence, and 4 of them without Evra playing at left-back, who, for me, is one of United's most consistent performers, just probably the best left-back in the division. So the fact that they've been able to go on that sort of run with a second string and being able to change things around at right-back, playing Rafael or Neville, that's the remarkable thing about it. And
what the thing in the middle is that Vidic has been there all the time. And when Ferdinand's come out of the team, all of a sudden he's been the boss in there. You can see it. I mean, yesterday he had a fantastic game.
He stepped up, hasn't he?
Yeah, he used all his experience. Well, all of a sudden he's the senior man in the back four. Right, Gary has played and Rafael's come in, but he's been the consistent performer in there. He's been in almost every game. All of a sudden the manager's gone. And he's come and he's showed himself to be a real leader, and he's shown the way, and obviously playing with young Johnny Evans, who's a bright talent, but when you go in and you're playing in the big games, yesterday he just looked he looked at home. And that's all to do with playing with somebody who they know they will get 100% from every game, and he's bringing everybody together. You've got the goalkeeper as well, who shouldn't be underestimated.
No, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, Van der Sar, he's extended his stay there earlier on in the season, and Van der Sar is a key element. I mean, goalkeeper can sometimes be underestimated, but he has been consistently. And
he doesn't drop too many clangers either, which is crucial, because in those tight games, and United have had a few 1-0s this season, haven't they? The last, perhaps, you look back to going back to the game at Anfield and that mix-up between Van der Sar and Wes Brown for the first goal. Other than that, it's difficult to think, well, he's not played at his best this season. Kuszczak, good goalkeeper, good shot stopper, but whether his distribution makes him the heir apparent, I'm not sure. Ben Foster, a lot of people talking about him being future England goalkeeper, but I think he's broken a finger before the trip to Japan, and so he's on the sidelines again for a bit. So it's great to have someone like Van der Sar with his experience and his consistency.
I think more than anything, rather than looking at shot saving, and it's temperament for me. The most important thing for a goalkeeper's temperament is that he stays cool, even when they're getting bombarded, and he has been. That's what he's good at. It never looks like he's flustered. Where you might look at the other two who haven't got the real experience. That at certain times you can see it, but it doesn't have to show in your face. Body language sometimes gives it away. He never looks flustered, and that gives an assurance to the rest of the back four.
I think Van der Sar is appreciating his football now. He won the European Cup with Ajax as a youngster, but I think he appreciated it and enjoyed it more with United last season, and seeing the potential in being able to finish his career by winning more trophies, which is a nice way to go out, isn't it?
Absolutely. Let's move it forward just a tad, because obviously it was a big defeat for Chelsea, a big win for Manchester United. Do you still anticipate Chelsea won't go away?
They won't be allowed to, because the nature of the quality of the players that they've got, whilst it wasn't shown yesterday, we did see, we know what's in that team. You know, to me their midfield looks too clustered, you know. They've got Deco, they've got Frank Lampard, Ballack, and they're all on top of each other. They've got no natural width except what they get from the fullbacks. Joe Cole played, he still doesn't look he's 100% fit yet. So he's got a problem, again, maybe the one that Capello had with England, where you accommodate all the talents and try and get the balance right. And also the talk is, you know, we talk about Drogba and you talk about Nicolas Anelka. Anelka's done really well, and they've had the thing for me now is that maybe we'll not see Drogba play again. Not in real terms, he'll be on the bench. You know, yesterday everybody is probably said to the manager, "Come on, you've got to play Drogba." Drogba is the one who's going to give you that physical presence. Well, he didn't do that yesterday. I had a feeling, in many ways, that he was a little bit intimidated because the last time Vidic and him had a run, Vidic doesn't give in to anything, and I thought maybe he had the edge mentally over him.
Yeah, it's interesting. We will come to the debate about Liverpool and obviously the comments Rafa Benitez made in part two. But there is a feeling, isn't there? I mean, Sir Alex mentioned it, I think, last week. He felt it was between Chelsea and Manchester United. How much psychological damage is there? But are Chelsea the team to recover?
Well, Chelsea's problem has got to be, if you look at the games between the big four, because a lot was talked about how United only picked up 1 point from their 3 games against their rivals, but all of those games were away from home. Yeah. Chelsea's 3 games against their rivals had all been played at Stamford Bridge, and they'd also just picked up a point. So they've been to Old Trafford and been well beaten. They've still got to go to Anfield and to the Emirates. Over the course of a season, you'd expect the Big Four's record against the other 16 teams to be fairly similar, wouldn't you? Surely it's the results between them which ultimately may decide the destination of the Premier League trophy. And Chelsea have got 1 point from 4 games and 2 more away from home to come.
OK, thanks for the moment, Steve. Thanks, Frank. That's the end of part 1. After the break, we'll be talking about the Wigan game that's coming up in the week, and also Rafa Benitez versus Fergie, and on and off the field. That's going to be interesting. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back to part 2 of the United Debate Show with myself, Alistair Mann, Frank Stapleton and Steve Wyeth of BBC Radio Manchester. Well, we were discussing before the break about Chelsea and the game yesterday. There was sort of a background to all that game, wasn't there? And over the weekend, with the comments made by Rafa Benitez about Sir Alex Ferguson, that effectively he felt that Sir Alex Ferguson had got away with things on a regular basis. What do you write into that?
Well, I think Alex Ferguson probably can't believe that second week in January and he's managed to get under one of his rivals' skin. It was a throwaway comment from Alex Ferguson, which I think prompted Benitez's fury somewhat, that Ferguson had suggested that Liverpool would struggle to maintain their position at the top of the table in the second half of the season. But it must have got to Benitez for him to sit down, get out a pad and write down his little list of grievances and then air them in public. Strange timing, and I sort of wonder what the FA and the Premier League do and how they deal with Alex Ferguson, how that's got anything to do with Rafael Benitez, unless he feels he's been treated more harshly over a similar incident, which, as far as I'm aware, he's not served a touchline ban recently for anything he may have said or done to a referee. So I'd have thought, whatever his grievances were, and by all means talk about it in private with your friends and your colleagues, it seemed a bit odd to sit in front of a press conference and say, oh, by the way, just before we go, these are the things I'm unhappy about that Alex Ferguson has got away with.
Did Rafa have a point amidst all of it, or was he just trying to step up the psychological warfare?
I think if you go back a few years, I mean, Sir Alex has been warned on many occasions. Just recently he had a 2-game ban for his rant at Atkinson in the Hull match. But I think overall, if you look at it, Benitez is probably looking at himself more, because he's looking at his situation and think, are we being treated differently? Why should... And he'll see it, and totally as Alex Ferguson would see it from Manchester United. Why are Manchester United not this? Why is this happening? Why is that happening? Why is it? And he mentioned about the players going around the referee and things like that. And we mustn't forget last season when they had the player sent off. Mascherano was sent off for Old Trafford, and the same situation. It was all off the bench. I mean, in the end, Benitez himself had to pull the player away and tell him to get off the pitch because he'd been sent off before it erupted into something worse. So all those things come together. It isn't just we look more recently, don't we? And that's we need to be looking longer. And in the end, he thought, I've got to get this off my chest, and that's probably what it was. But you know, Fergie probably think to himself, well, I didn't really need to do too much on this occasion so what will he do now? He'll probably spike it up a little bit in the next couple of weeks, particularly when we've got the build up to the Liverpool match coming up in March.
Yeah, I mean, let's. I mean, United's obviously a former. Frank's obviously a former United player, but from a sort of impartial standpoint, is there a feeling that Alex has got away with things that other managers haven't, or is Rafa, as I say, just trying to stoke up the psychological battle?
Probably quite a bit of what, if not all of what, Rafael Benitez said was quite fair. I don't think you'd sit and listen to what he said, and it was delivered in a very measured fashion, and say, actually, no, he's wrong there. Fairly close to the mark, I'd imagine, and, you know, the power of Manchester United and Fergie's longevity, you know, probably does have some effect on how he and the club are dealt with, and maybe the strength of their ability to contest issues that they may feel would be raised with the FA or the Premier League may have some bearing on how hard they do or don't come down on Manchester United. And I think probably the thing that Benitez feels is that whatever happened in the fallout from that Mascherano incident at Old Trafford last season, that the whole respect campaign came about because of something that had happened involving his club. So perhaps he sort of feels as though, in a way, the finger was pointed at them as being, right, enough is enough, that incident was the final straw. And now he's probably analysing every incident afterwards and saying, well, hang on a second, when Mascherano contested a decision with the referee, this whole new policy came into place, so why are other clubs not being treated in the same way? But it's probably just, like I said, it was the final straw.
Paranoia, I call it.
Yeah. Is it not always the case, going back through football history, that the team who are most dominant, other teams feel they get things their way that the other 19 clubs in this case, 21 clubs in the old days used to get? Is that not what happens?
I think you're probably right, Alistair, because you look at people, the radio shows and different things, and supporters come on and they talk about there's never been a penalty given at Old Trafford for so many games, and people go and look at stats, and they can always always tell you the truth, but they can tell you, look at certain balances. And you look at it sometimes, and people say, but the team that's a top team are always hated. That's the way it is. When Chelsea were top a couple of years back, they were the team that everybody was targeting. And you have to live with that. But being a top dog, that's what you have to live with. But Manchester United will deal with that. It's really, you can talk forever about all these off-the-field things. What happens on the field is the most important thing, because that will determine where all the trophies go. And then, at the end of it, whoever wins got the bragging rights.
OK, let's get back on the pitch, shall we? Wigan on Wednesday. Is there a feeling, perhaps, that, not after the Lord Mayor's show, but after such an impressive victory, after such a big win, is Wigan almost potentially a harder game in some ways? Because it is, let's get back up to that level again.
Well, from what we saw from United against Chelsea, that was obviously something that they'd been looking at. Perhaps since they came back from Japan, they'd sort of gone through the motions, they'd not been at their best, and suddenly they clicked into gear a little bit more against Chelsea without, as we've already discussed, having to be at their best. The trick now for United is that in Wigan, they've got the Premier League's form. United on a great run. Wigan have won 6 of 7. Coming up the table, I think there was even talk to Steve Bruce after their victory over Spurs that they might be challenging for a UEFA Cup place.
Why not? Why not?
He sort of laughed it off, but they're there or thereabouts, aren't they? So that will be the challenge. They'll have to make a few changes, I'm sure. Will Alex Ferguson for the game, but that will be the challenge because they've got a real informed team and they're very well organised. I bet they won't fall apart the way that Chelsea did in the second half.
No, I mean, let's be honest about it now. Look at the table. United play Wigan Wednesday, which is their game in hand, or one of their games in hand. The other game in hand is a few weeks away, but before Liverpool play Everton next Monday, United then face Bolton. They could be ahead of Liverpool and on the same number of games played. So it's a big game, Wigan, isn't it?
I think, yeah, it always has been. I mean, you might say the Chelsea game has always been in their sights because you come back from Japan, you know that you know what's ahead of you. They had the Stoke match. And then he had the Middlesbrough game, and then the cup game against Southampton. And the manager has shuffled the pack. And he's even admitted that he's kept certain players for the Chelsea match. The Wigan game, in many ways, could be tougher. They know that it's one of these games in hand. The incentive there is for them to win the 2 games and go back to the top of the league. That's what obviously all season they've not been there. But now they're looking at a situation where you could possibly be a little bit deflated by the next game. This is where he's such a good manager, is that he's able to bring the players and stress the importance of them. Their preparation, we don't even question. It's just mentally making sure, and this is how he'll pick his team. It won't be the fact, look at, because what you could do is use the momentum from Sunday and play almost the same team again if the players are looking fresh enough. So, it doesn't automatically believe that he'll switch it round again. What he could say is there's still a bit of momentum from that match. Put those guys in. If they do the job within an hour, then he can shuffle it around again.
Looks as though he may have to replace Patrice Evra, for example. But would you, other than that, largely expect, as Frank does, to be pretty much the same 11 out there?
I wonder whether he'll play Rafael at right back, whether he'd look to play Gary Neville twice in 4 days. Ryan Giggs has said himself that he finds it difficult to play twice in a week, and having produced a man of the match performance against Chelsea, I wouldn't expect to see him in the United midfield. I mean, Everett injured himself celebrating, setting up United's second goal, and his foot was in one of those plastic casts in the tunnel afterwards. So, yeah, I don't think we'll be seeing him on Wednesday. But it'll be 2 derbies coming up, Wigan and Bolton. Both teams are always sort of try and put up. Wigan in particular, sort of against Manchester City, have always had a habit of raising their game. They've got a good record against City. They've never taken anything off United mind, and United lost at Bolton last season, so they'll be, albeit a Nicholas Anelka goal for Bolton, they're a much changed outfit now, but they'll be looking at those. And as we've been saying, it's one thing to target Chelsea and produce that performance, but you've got 2 derby games to try and do something similar in.
I mean, let's get the glass ball out. Would you anticipate United will find a way of getting past Wigan and Bolton and will be top by the time Liverpool play Everton next Monday? I
think it's hard after the hunger and desire they showed yesterday to go any other way. They won't, in their own mind, they'll know they'll be 2 difficult matches, and they won't underestimate either of these teams. Wigan are, as you said, are a decent team. They've had a fantastic run of games, and they do play. It's not defensive. They do have a go. And I think that's to their credit. That's where they're getting results. They're not being negative. They're really going for it. Now, they played Tottenham the other week and lost in the Cup. Then all of a sudden, they bounced back again yesterday. So these 2 games are really big matches. But, talk about it's always about the next match. It's true. In this context, it's very, very true that the next game is the most important one.
OK, Frank, thanks very much for your time. Thanks to Steve as well. That's it for this week. Join us next week, same time, same place. Until then, goodbye.